Welcome back to another video with Tech and Navid. Today we'll be going over valid parentheses, LeetCode's number 20th problem. This problem is really good because I've seen it come a lot on some OAs, especially of recently of 2023. And the solution, actually, I've seen its algorithm be implemented in a lot of different questions, and understanding how to solve this problem I think is a really good thing to have in your repertoire. So let's go ahead and get started. I went ahead and like this problem. So given a string of S containing just the characters, parentheses, brackets, and curly brackets, determine if the input string is valid. An input string is valid if open brackets must be closed by the same brackets, open brackets must be closed in correct order, and every closed bracket has a corresponding open bracket at the same time. So let's just go ahead and look at it quickly. So the question is essentially asking us, when we have an open parentheses, make sure that that open parentheses is closed by a closing parentheses. Same with brackets, same with curly braces. And then this is a false output because this open parentheses is not closed by a closed parentheses, and this bracket is has no opening bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and make some examples also to essentially get us a better understanding of what the question's asking. So in this problem, essentially, I'm going to draw out something that would be valid. So this right here, this would translate into a valid response, because regardless of the fact that the parentheses are essentially not in consecutive order, meaning like it's not like this, right? It's not like a parentheses next inside of parentheses like the input test case we had, number 2, right? The parentheses can be anywhere as long as they close that specific parentheses, and the brackets are closed too, right? So this bracket is closed with this bracket, and this parentheses closed with this parentheses. This could also be valid too. If we added brackets in the middle and between the semi braces and the parentheses, this would also translate to be valid. This wouldn't be valid though if we essentially took away that and the bracket was essentially without a closing bracket, or vice versa, if the had a closing bracket but not a opening bracket. So that's would be invalid. So this would be invalid, right? And then I'm going to put this right here at the bottom too, so as we solve this problem, you guys can look at it and see for reference what's valid, what's invalid. There's an extra bracket somewhere here. Yep, there it is. Okay, cool. So we have that. So to go about solving this problem, essentially, first we want to think about how we are going to relate to the values. So as we're traversing through the string values, essentially, I think you can obviously tell that we need a way to essentially correspond a key to a value, a pair to a pair, meaning like if we get the open parentheses, how do we know that we need a closing parentheses, right? So to do that, obviously, we can use the dictionary value or the hash map for Python. And we're going to basically correspond each of our values that we have to the correct pair. I'm going to go ahead and do this quickly, and I'll be right back. So I just went ahead and did that to save some time for you guys. If you see right here in the dictionary, we've essentially set the key value to be the opening pair, because as we traverse through the array, we're going to always want to look for the opening pair, because the only way for this to work is that we have to have the opening pair and before we have the closing pair, right? So as we traverse through the array, we're essentially going to look for that opening pair, and then we're going to try to match it to the value if it exists, and then that would be true. So after that, also we want to also make a stack which is going to hold the values to basically hold the values as we traverse through the array and we try to match it with the key. So this is actually a keen example of LIFO. So LIFO is last in, first out, and it's essentially what's going to tell us to use the stack, right? So the last pair inside of the array, we're going to essentially remove, we're going to pop it, and then compare it to the ones inside of the current stack, right? So the stack's going to essentially be a placeholder for us. I'm going to actually write the for loop so it makes a little more sense. So we're going to go through the we're going to go through the strings that we have. We're going to go through S, right? And if bracket is in values, right? So this is going to essentially check if bracket, because bracket is only going to be going through these values right here. And if bracket, right, so if open parentheses is inside of values, right, because when we use the in keyword with dictionaries or hash maps, which are basically dictionaries, but they're called that in Python, it's going to look at the key. It always will look at the key. So if bracket is in values, so if this open parentheses exists and it's in values, then we're going to essentially take it and we're going to append that to stack, right? So we're going to take our value and we're going to append it to stack, because stack for us will only hold the open brackets, right? Because the stack, what we're going to do with that is we're going to have all the open brackets inside of there, and as we traverse through the array, we find the closing bracket, right? If essentially bracket hits a value of a closing value, and remember, like I mentioned, when we use the in keyword with a dictionary, it only checks the keys, right? And if we look at it, what are our keys? Our keys are only the opening bracket values, right? So once we get to like example 2 right here, once we get to the closing bracket, this is not going to trigger. This statement's not going to trigger. We're going to work down here into making a condition essentially that once we find a closing value, we're going to pop that value from the, we're going to pop essentially the value from stack, right? We're going to pop in the last value from stack because we want to essentially close the most recent bracket before we can close the first bracket that we put in, right? So say example, I have in my stack right here, say I have an opening bracket. Say we did this example right here. I have an opening bracket, or no, let's say we did this example right here, the one I made that's invalid, right? Say I have, or let's do the valid one actually. That'll make a little more sense because it is valid, right? Say in stack right now, say holds these values. So stack right now has the opening parentheses because we appended it, right? And we're going to go into the next value, right? It's going to have an opening bracket, okay? Now it's going to be an opening semi bracket. We appended it again. This condition came to true and we appended it again, right? The next value is, okay, say it's another opening brace too, right? The next value is a closing bracket, right? The closing bracket is essentially the first thing that we have to close before we can close the parentheses for it to be valid, right? Because we have to essentially go in that order. We're gonna have to close brackets first, then semi braces, and then parentheses for it to actually work. And we're first gonna check whether or not stack is equal to 0. So if stack equals 0, that means we never appended, that means this statement on line number 9 never became true, and we never appended an opening value to our stack. If that's the case, then we're going to want to return false, because that means that no opening values are passed in, and we can never have a closing value if there was never an opening value to be true, right? So if that's the case, then we'll return false. Or essentially what we're going to do now is that we're going to go into values and we're going to search for the corresponding opening values value, or the corresponding keys opening value, right? So we're going to essentially do that by going into the values pair. Next we're going to go into stack and we're going to pop the most recent value, and if it doesn't equal bracket, then we're going to return false. And what's this is doing now, right? So it's going to go to values. It's going to go into our dictionary. And at the value of bracket, right? So say that we're at the 3rd iteration. Say we're at parentheses, and so say this is our input. Our input is parentheses, semi-brace, and then bracket, okay? So this is our input. So we've appended, so we're going to, our first iteration, number 1 right here. I'm going to go down. So our first iteration, bracket equals, or stack equals parentheses. So we're going to append that to stack. So our first iteration, stack equals, stack contains our parentheses, right? So the stack has our parentheses. Okay, cool. That's our first iteration. It goes through, line number 9 executes, cool. We have stack in our parentheses. Next is the semi-brace, right? We're going to go through, we're going to check in bracket. Bracket exists. Cool, it's in our keys value pair, and now we're going to append to the stack our semi-brace, or yeah, our semi-brace. So now, cool, it's in there. Next, we're going to go into the closing brace right here. We're going to run through it. So bracket now, bracket is not in values now because it's a closing brace, right? And only our keys are opening, right? So now it's going to come into this else if clause. So now it's going to first check if length of stack equals 0. Length of stack doesn't equal 0, right? Because we have 2 values in it. So that's true. Or the value.stack.pop doesn't equal bracket. So what's bracket right now? Bracket, we're on the third iteration. So this is bracket. Bracket is, so our iteration right now is on the closing bracket, right? And now it's going to go into values, and it's going to go to the position of stack.pop, right? What does a stack do? It's last in, first out, right? The most recent thing that we put into the stack is the semi-brace, right? And when we pop that, the pop function essentially removes something, and it also returns it for us to be able to use it. So for values, when we stack.pop, it's going to essentially go to the position of this value, right? This key. It's going to go into the semi-brace key, and it's going to look for the value at that key. And what is it? It's a curly brace, right? And now it's saying that in order for this function to work, in order for us to return true, we want to have that semi-brace. We want to have the closing semi-brace for that. But it doesn't equal bracket, right? Because bracket right now on the third iteration is it's the brace. It's the closing brace, right? And we want the closing semi-brace because that's what we pop. So this is going to be true. So this value is true. Stack.pop at that position is a semi-brace. It's not a brace. So it doesn't equal bracket. And then we're going to have to return false. So this essentially takes care of it for us. Takes care of the checking whether or not the values inside of the stack are in correspondence to the keys. Okay? So when that happens, then all we need to do is essentially, after we appended everything to the bracket, if this never executes, all we want to do is we want to come down and we want to return the length of the stack. Oops, I can't spell. So return whether or not the length of the stack equals 0, right? So if the length of the stack doesn't equal 0, then that means that our stack worked. Our stack was fine. Every value got a correspondence value. We always appended it, and we were okay. If we return false, then we would never get to this execution, right? And if this returns, this won't ever return false, because if it is a closing bracket without an opening bracket, we would be able to return false right here. So we're gonna go ahead and submit that. So we're gonna go ahead and put that there. Oopsies. That should work. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. This is our submission. And I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm getting back into the groove of making these videos, and I did take a break for a while, and I love the support. You guys were awesome. I really enjoy making these videos for you guys, and I hope to get better and hold myself accountable for learning the material before I come and present it to other people. So thank you so much for stopping by. It means a lot. Let's hopefully get this video to 10 likes. That'd be mean a lot, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Have a good one, guys.